It was actually 34 years ago. I had to figure that out when I was 17, so I'm 51 now, and I could remember it just as well as the year it happened.
I caved in and said okay, and had the abortion, and 2 months later we were married.
Well, I was 16 years old, and the father was 17.
I was really young, I was 15, and I was living with my grandma actually.
I've had 2 abortions, yes, and I was a little older when I had my abortions.
So I drove home and felt relief, and at that point never really considered that it would impact my life. I felt that it was the only decision that I could make, and at that point, I never looked back.
I decided in the bathroom when I saw the pregnancy test that I couldn't do it. I'd gone to church and I kind of went against everything that I believed, but I just sort of decided in that instant that the pressures that my family was putting on me to be like so great and to fix everybody's problems by going to college, all that influenced me. But I made the decision, but I talked to my boyfriend about it, and I said, I don't know what to do. And I kind of let him make the decision, and I think I knew instinctively that he would be like, well, I'm 21, you're 15. That's going to be weird and hard to explain. So I knew that he would urge me to go in that direction. So I sort of gave him the decision-making process because I knew he would decide what I wanted. His thoughts would align with mine. So I kind of, for a long time, I was like, well, it was Chris's decision. He wanted me to have the abortion. But I think I told him and let him decide because really that's what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to have to be the one carrying the weight of making that decision.
I think after the second one, it compounded. I mean, it made me feel worse. I was beginning to really think I was not a very nice person.
I mean, I left there thinking, okay, problem solved. I really felt like, okay, move on. I wouldn't let myself cry, and just deal with it. You solve the problem. And it's surprised me, especially when I got older, to see how it created so many other problems that I wasn't aware of. I think the biggest thing is it kind of changed something inside of me. It hardened me a bit.
The first 5 years I buried it. Didn't really think about it. First time I got pregnant, oh my gosh. Well, then I had the miscarriage, but then the next pregnancy was viable, and especially as the baby grew and I could feel this baby, now I probably will cry, I could feel this baby inside of me. And I knew then what I had done.
I decided not to have a baby because I wanted to do all these great things, and so now I have to be really, really good at everything. I can't just be good. I was very purposeful in my decision to have an abortion, and so I need to be extra great because I decided I was going to be good. I need to be really great. I wanted to go graduate high school. I was only going to be the second person in my family to graduate high school. I wanted to go be a college graduate. I wanted to get my master's degree. I wanted to have a career, and I did all of these things, and I did them well. I got good grades in high school, and then I kind of, it took me a while to find where I wanted to go to school and find my place in what I wanted to do. And I did really well in college. I graduated with honors, and then I went to grad school and I graduated with a 4.0, and I had the highest score on the comprehensive exam in my program, and I got a great job literally right after I graduated with my undergraduate degree. I got a job that people still now are like, why did you quit that? You made so much money and you were doing great, and I did everything that I wanted to do, but and that was why I was like, I'm going to have an abortion, because I need to do all these things. And I did all these things. I crossed them off my list, and I just never felt happy or satisfied. And I think that, obviously that feeling of dissatisfaction kept coming up because I kept having to do something new and something better. And I just never felt happy. And now I can say, I never felt like my choice, nothing that I did really justified my choice. None of the reasons why I chose to have an abortion ever made me happy, and that's all I wanted to do, was just to do them and to be happy. And so I think years down the road, now I can say, that surprised me, because I did them, so I had an abortion so I could do those things, and doing them didn't bring me any joy.
What I saw was a fix or a remedy to an unwanted pregnancy. In reality, was not a fix at all, because emotionally, what it birthed was a lot. I mean, it wasn't something that I could just draw a line and say and act like it never happened and think that it didn't affect my life. And when I realized how deeply it did affect my life, that was a shock. I talked to a lot of women that have had abortions, and each one has their own special story, and how their abortion impacts them is personal to them. But the thing that is so common is the emotional scars that none of us were prepared for.
I became a different person. I was not, I was ugly inside, believe me. My heart began to harden. I began to drink alcohol pretty heavily. I decided to start numbing myself started dabbling with some drugs. I had even gotten to the point of thinking suicide. That's how bad I got. I was just hating myself.
Once I had it, we never talked about it again. He didn't want to talk about it. I didn't talk about it. I just buried it as deep as I possibly could. But I know that had an effect on our relationship, among other things. It wasn't the only thing, but I know after that I hated myself for having done what I had done.
When I tried to commit suicide, my mother, she knew something was wrong. She never interfered in my life. She never just stopped by or anything. But something told her something was wrong. And she tried calling, and I wasn't answering my phone. And so she decided to come over, and when I didn't answer the door, she just walked in and found me on my living room floor, sitting there trying to get the nerve to cut my wrists. And to this day, I know it was God that spoke to her. And she said, "You're going to get some help." And she took me home after we found my son, who I had no idea where he was. He was out running around somewhere, and it was late at night. This was a little boy, 8, 9 years old, outside. And that's the kind of mother I had become. Didn't even, And we found him, and we gathered a bunch of our stuff together, and they took me to their house. She took me to their house, and my mom and my dad, they sat down and talked with me, and they prayed with me, and they said, you need to get some help, and we're going to help you get that, pay for that help. My parents were not wealthy people. They barely made it as it was, but they paid for me to get some counseling and through that counselor, I started to at least start liking myself a little bit more. But he actually directed me to the Bible. And he said, you need to learn about the God who loves you. And so I started reading it, and I had not started going back to church yet, but I started reading the Bible, and it started showing me how much God loved me. And it was not very much later that my husband came into my life.
You know, leading up until this point, I had always felt like, you know, I didn't regret my abortion because it meant that I got to go to school, and I went to graduate school, and I got a job, and I did all these things, you know. And so I always said, oh, I don't regret it, you know, because it enabled me to have this life that I have now. And I wouldn't have this life, I wouldn't be doing these things and be where I am. And that night, as my friend Megan was standing in my room, and we were chatting, and I said, you know, can I tell you something that I've never told anybody before? And I told her, you know, my daughter would be 13, and I just was so overwhelmed all of a sudden for the first time by like such regret and grief. And I mean, I was crying, and I don't like to cry in front of people. I don't really like to cry to begin with, but crying in front of people is really hard because, you know, I don't like to be weak. And I mean, I was like ugly crying. It was not pretty, and if I'd been wearing makeup, it would be smeared everywhere. And I just, it was just the first time ever, you know, since my abortion in 13 years, that I had felt like real sadness over what I had lost. And I think that, I think it was so hard because I realized like the potential, not the potential life, because I believe that it was life, you know, but it was just the first time that I realized like this. I look at my sister, who's this great little kid. She was 8 years old at the time, and I realized I could have had this great little kid, you know. And I was just filled with so much regret and sadness. All of a sudden, it was like a wall inside of me. It had been building up. I had been putting it at bay, and all of a sudden, that wall just broke.
Lots of guilt, lots of shame. I realized more of that as I got older, especially when I got pregnant, when I wanted to be pregnant. Tremendous amount of fear that something was going to happen to the baby, even during my pregnancy, through most of his early childhood. My poor son, I just was sure something was going to happen to him because I deserved to have something bad happen to me because I had done this horrible thing. And it's interesting because I didn't even understand truly what I had done, but there was a part of me that knew that I had taken a baby and now I wanted a baby, and so I didn't know anything about God, so maybe, you know, God was going to take him because look what I had done. And so a lot of fear. I had a lot of nightmares when I was pregnant that someone had kidnapped him or that I couldn't find him, things like that. So it had a big impact, and even more than I realized, in how I parented him. He couldn't move from one side to the other. If I couldn't see him instantly, I was in panic mode. And of course that wasn't healthy on him. So he suffered a bit of consequences as well from that choice. So it surprised me how it affected me more, I think, when I got older, and really affected me when I was pregnant with my second son, because there's 7 years in between them. So my oldest was 7, and I was trying to include him in what was happening. And so I was reading a book, and it showed the development of a baby. So I'm reading that to my 7-year-old so that he can be in on what's happening with this new baby. And I see the picture of how formed the baby was at 11 weeks. See, I didn't know any of that. And I came undone and was becoming hysterical and having nightmares. And at that time, I had become a Christian and was praying. And that's when I actually was led to a Bible study that helped me to deal specifically with the abortion, and to be able, because I was coming unraveled. It was hitting me as an adult, seeing what I had done. Even if I was ignorant and didn't know, I still had taken the life of a fetus that had a beating heart. You know, I saw all this, and it hit me. So that was when I was 31.
As devastating as the decision was for my life, the destruction in his life was so apparent. For me, the ultimate result was that I found forgiveness and healing and restoration. And for him, it just was the beginning of just one bad experience after another. And I feel that the root of many of the things that he chose in life were deeply rooted in that one act.
I was hating myself, and I was hating myself because I took the life of my 2 children. And I just thought there was no way out. In fact, I was certain that God had just written me off. So I thought, okay, what do I have to live for? And Mom and Dad will take my son. I knew they would. And I was in such pain inside. Here I'd lost the relationship that I hoped would go on, and I felt no hope. And so it was the fact that I took life, I felt I had no right to live. And that's why I decided to try to commit suicide, because life was so painful and I just couldn't see past the abortions that I had done.
Once I really came to the point of realizing what I had done, I hated myself. And that was another thing. I mean, I was trying to make myself feel good, and food was my addiction that I used. I mean, everybody has their different addiction, drugs, alcohol, you know, shopping, whatever, but that was mine. And that part of it was, that was something my husband could not control. And also just feeding into feeling miserable about myself because I hated myself in general. It made me feel good for a moment. And, but of course, when that moment was over, I hated myself even worse, because this was so out of control, which made me hate myself even more. Such a downward spiral.
I was relieved I'm not pregnant anymore. But at the exact same time, though, I was feeling this emptiness. There was something going on inside of me that I couldn't explain. And there was regret and relief at the same time, which is hard to explain. I didn't know where to turn because I was just emotionally distraught, and I was having to lie to people, and I didn't like that either. On one hand, they tell you that it's okay to have an abortion, that you have this right to have an abortion, and that it's no big deal. But yet, when people go through abortion, afterwards, they still don't want to talk about it. If it was so right, why is it so hard to talk about it afterwards? People are ashamed of having an abortion. They don't want to face loved ones and friends and tell them that they had an abortion.
People did find out relatively quickly at the church that I went to. My boyfriend left a note in my locker basically breaking up with me, and I shared my locker with a good friend, and she read the note that he had mentioned something about, you know, we could have worked things out except for the baby. And so my friend confronted me, and she told another friend, and you know, churches can unfortunately be gossipy places, and this was one where she told a friend, who told the parent, who told everybody. So there was a lot of shame and judgment there for me. And so my spiritual health after that was it crashed. As soon as I graduated high school and I didn't have to go to church anymore, I was done. And I became completely opposite of the person that I was, spiritually. Everything that I had sort of learned as I was going to church and I had believed in, I became completely the opposite, especially when it came to the whole pro-choice, pro-life movement. Going to church, we were taught, that these babies they're babies just as much as a baby outside of the womb. And I became ardently, very vocally pro-choice. And I remember when I was working up at UCSB, I had an internship in their women's center, and there was that sort of big blue iconic Keep Abortion Legal poster in my desk where I worked. And I remember thinking, yeah, I totally support that. That's my cause. And I think the whole time I missed certain parts of the relationship that I had with God.
You really don't have an understanding about the impact that it's going to have on you. You don't know, because the worst part of it is yet to come, and the regret. And when you look back and think how that one choice, that one decision had such a profound impact, not only on yourself, but my parents missed out on a grandbaby. My children missed out on a sibling. I missed out on a daughter. The ripple effect, you don't think about that, and the life, and what could have happened through that life. There's just so much more, and it's just so much more than just a solution to a problem. And you really can get through the problem. There are people that are willing to come alongside. It's harder, absolutely, but it's so worth it. So I would try to, because to me, I get the practical part of it. I understand that crisis that you're in. I remember that feeling. So, I wouldn't want to just say, well, because God says so, even though that's a strong part of why I would say that, because it is a life at conception. It does have purpose, and there is a God who will help you through. But to address the fact of that, and you just really have no idea what you're choosing. And it's a temporary fix, and it feels deceitful. It feels like you think it's going to do this, and then all of a sudden you've been tricked. And look, surprise, this is really what it's going to do. And that's what I feel like you're being deceived in thinking that you're solving a problem when you're signing up for way more problems.
At the beginning, when I first had my abortions, I was really kind of pro-abortion. I don't like to use the word choice because I think it can be choice of abortion or choice for life. So pro-abortion, I was kind of in that camp for a while, because if I was helping someone else get an abortion or tell her it's okay, then I was validating what I did. But when I started having all of my own emotional and spiritual regrets and all the pain that it was causing me, and then started realizing that it was not my choice to choose life or death for my unborn child, I started to see that life is important. Life is created by God, and that I had no right to make that choice. And I started to look at life from a completely different way, especially when I became pregnant with my daughter, my husband and I. When I felt her move inside of me, I think that's when it hit me the hardest. I realized the grave mistake that I had made. And the day I felt her move inside of me, I literally fell to our kitchen floor, and I wept at what I had done, that I realized I had ended a life that I had no right to take.
That I think that a lot of women, including myself, really bought into a deception when we chose abortion. And I think that there is no escaping the consequences of that action, that you don't just come out of it okay, and that there is no amount of counseling or therapy or even hiding it that will allow you to move forward in the best, healthy way you can. And I believe that the only healing that can come from that decision is by acknowledging that act in light of God's Word.
It just seemed to be so about me, and it's just so about a whole lot more than just myself, and take time to really find out all about it, because it's a very, very serious choice.
When I had the abortion, I was 16 and he was 17. And we had come from average middle-class families, and you know, not what I would say disadvantaged, but just average. And over the 20 years, he had gone through 4 divorces and had been in jail over drugs. And basically his life had just been a mess. Once we went to the abortion clinic and it was done, we never talked about it after that. So I was able to find him. I contacted him and I asked if he would be willing to meet with me. And he was. So we scheduled a time where we could get together, and I shared with him what I had learned in how the act of the abortion, how it had impacted my life. And not only how it impacted my life, but that having then worked through and realized a healing of that I wanted to be able to extend to him forgiveness, one, and secondly, to ask for his forgiveness. So it was a very good conversation, and as we were getting ready to leave, he reached for his wallet, and I thought he was going to pay for our coffee. But as he pulled out his wallet, he also pulled out a piece of paper. And that paper was the receipt for the abortion that he had paid for, that he had carried for 20 years.